Burnout doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like avoiding your camera. Sometimes it looks like guilt for not practicing. Sometimes it looks like wondering if you even care anymore. If you've stepped away from photography before, or if you're trying to come back and it feels heavier than it should, this isn't because you failed. It's because the way you learned before didn't support you long term. And restarting doesn't mean going backward. It means choosing a smarter way forward. Burnout in photography rarely comes from lack of passion. It comes from pressure. Pressure to improve faster. Pressure to keep up. Pressure to justify the time you spend learning. A lot of photographers burn out not because they didn't love photography, but because they tried to force it to grow too quickly. They treated learning like a sprint, and photography isn't built for that. Burnout often begins quietly. You start feeling behind, you start comparing yourself again, you start turning learning into obligation instead of curiosity. Eventually, even picking up the camera feels heavy. That heaviness gets misinterpreted as losing interest. But most of the time, it's exhaustion. Another reason burnout happens is because many photographers never had a stable foundation. They learned in pieces, they skipped steps without realizing it, so every new challenge required extra effort. That constant effort adds up, especially when photography is layered on top of work, family, and real life. Burnout is often your nervous system asking for a pause, not a quit. Another thing that contributes to burnout is identity pressure. Once you've invested time, money, or public effort into photography, it can feel like you're not allowed to step back. You tell yourself you should push through, but pushing through without support doesn't build resilience. It builds resentment. Another thing that leads to burnout is confusing output with progress. Posting more, shooting more, consuming more. None of those guarantee learning. When effort isn't matched with clarity, people exhaust themselves without moving forward. That's discouraging. Another factor is unclear expectations. Many photographers restart thinking they should be back where they left off. But time away changes things. Your eye shifts, your confidence shifts, your tolerance for chaos shifts. Restarting doesn't mean returning to the same version of yourself. It means meeting yourself where you are now. Another reason burnout feels so personal is because photography is creative. When something creative stops feeling good, people assume something is wrong with them. But creativity needs safety. It needs space. It needs permission to change. Burnout often means the container wasn't right, not that the interest was wrong. Another thing that leads to burnout is chasing external validation. Likes, feedback, approval. Those things fluctuate. Basing motivation on them is unstable. When they disappear, so does momentum. That doesn't mean photography stopped mattering. It means the fuel source ran out. Another thing worth naming is that many photographers burn out because they never learned how to rest inside the process. They either went full speed or stopped entirely. There was no middle ground, no sustainable rhythm, no reset points. Without those, burnout becomes inevitable. Burnout is not weakness. It's information. It tells you what didn't work. It tells you where support was missing. It tells you where expectations were misaligned. Listening to that information is how you reset wisely, not by pretending it didn't happen, not by starting over aggressively, but by choosing differently this time. Restarting after burnout doesn't mean proving anything. It means rebuilding trust. Trust with yourself. Trust with the process. Trust that photography can exist without pressure attached to it. That trust comes back slowly, and that's okay. Resetting after burnout doesn't start with motivation. It starts with permission. Permission to come back slowly. Permission to not be where you were before. Permission to rebuild in a way that actually fits your life now. Most people restart photography the same way they started the first time. They dive in hard, they set big goals, they try to make up for lost time. That's usually what recreates burnout. A smarter reset begins smaller than you think. The first shift is changing the goal. The goal is not to get back to where you were. The goal is to feel steady again. Steady matters more than productive. When you aim for steadiness, pressure drops. Learning becomes possible again. Another important reset move is separating identity from output. You are not your last photo. You are not your posting frequency. You are not your progress speed. Photography is something you do, not something you owe proof for. Letting go of that pressure is uncomfortable at first, but it's necessary. Another part of a smart reset is narrowing your scope aggressively. Fewer genres, fewer techniques, fewer expectations. This is not regression, it's stabilization. Stability is what burnout took away. You rebuild it by simplifying. Another key piece is rebuilding foundations without judgment. Even if you've been shooting for years, even if you should know something by now, burnout often exposes gaps that were always there. That's not embarrassing. It's useful. You don't patch gaps by pretending they don't exist. You patch them by returning calmly. Another thing that helps is changing how you practice. Instead of long, exhausting sessions, practice briefly and consistently. 10 minutes counts. One intentional decision counts. Consistency heals burnout faster than intensity ever will. Another important reset step is separating learning from sharing. You don't need an audience while you rebuild. You don't need feedback yet, you need safety. Private practice removes pressure. Pressure delays recovery. Another part of resetting wisely is learning to stop before exhaustion hits. Most people wait until they're drained to stop. Burnout-aware learning stops, while energy is still available. That's how trust builds. You prove to yourself that photography won't take everything from you again. Another thing that helps is reframing rest. Rest is not quitting. Rest is integration. Your brain processes learning during rest. Skipping rest doesn't make learning faster. It makes it brittle. Another key part of resetting is redefining progress. Progress might look like enjoying the process again, or feeling less tense, or wanting to pick up the camera without guilt. Those are real wins. Another thing that helps is acknowledging that your life is different now. Time is different. Energy is different. Priorities are different. Resetting means designing photography around your current reality, not your past one. Another smart reset move is choosing structure that supports you instead of overwhelming you. Structure doesn't mean rigidity, it means predictability. Predictability creates safety. Safety allows creativity to return. Another thing that helps is trusting that starting smaller doesn't limit your future. It protects it. Every sustainable photography journey has reset points. People just don't talk about them. They quietly adjust, they quietly rebuild, and eventually, things feel lighter again. Resetting after burnout is not about erasing what happened. It's about learning from it. It's about choosing a pace that you can actually live with. That's how photography becomes something you return to, not something you recover from. At some point in a smart reset, something subtle changes. You stop bracing yourself. You stop wondering if this will fall apart again. Photography starts feeling neutral before it feels exciting. And that neutrality matters. It means your nervous system is no longer in defense mode. That's where rebuilding actually happens. One of the biggest signs that a reset is working is that you no longer feel rushed. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not trying to catch up. You're just showing up. That steadiness is fragile at first, which is why protecting it matters more than accelerating. Another thing that helps at this stage is letting go of the idea that motivation needs to be constant. Motivation fluctuates. That's normal. Consistency doesn't come from motivation. It comes from trust. Trust that photography won't demand too much from you again. Trust that you can stop without quitting. Trust that you can return without guilt. Another helpful shift is noticing when photography feels supportive again. When it feels grounding. When it feels like something you get to do, not something you should be better at by now. That shift doesn't happen through force. It happens through safety. Another thing that helps is allowing your relationship with photography to change. You might want different things now, different outcomes, different rhythms. That doesn't mean you failed the old version of yourself. It means you're evolving. Another important part of a sustainable reset is letting your skills come back unevenly. Some things will feel familiar quickly, others won't. That's okay. You don't need everything back at once. You just need enough comfort to keep going. Another thing that helps is recognizing that burnout doesn't disappear overnight. There may still be days where photography feels heavy. That doesn't mean the reset isn't working, it means healing isn't linear. Responding gently instead of pushing harder is part of the new pattern. Another helpful practice is noticing what doesn't drain you anymore. What feels easier? What feels calmer? Those signals matter. They show you what to lean into. Another thing that supports a long-term reset is redefining success. Success might look like enjoying the process again, or feeling confident without pressure, or having photography fit into your life instead of competing with it. Those outcomes are valid. Another thing that helps is accepting that sustainable photography doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It looks quiet, consistent, unremarkable. And that's exactly why it lasts. Another key realization is that restarting doesn't erase your experience. Everything you've learned still exists. It just needs a calmer container to live in. Another thing that helps is trusting that you're allowed to move forward without urgency. There is no penalty for taking your time. Photography is not keeping score. And finally, the most important part of restarting after burnout is believing that this time can be different. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're listening more closely to your energy, to your needs, to what actually supports you. That awareness is what turns a restart into something sustainable. And if you're here now, considering a reset instead of walking away completely, that already tells me something. You didn't lose your connection to photography, you just need a way forward that doesn't cost you yourself. If restarting photography has felt heavy or uncertain, clarity and pacing matter more than motivation. A reset works best when you know what actually deserves your energy and what can wait. There's a simple guide that lays out a calmer learning order, designed to support steady progress without pressure. Use it as a reference, not a rule book. Photography can fit into your life again without burning you out.